The studio lights glowed brightly as the crowd buzzed with excitement. Everyone was waiting for the next guest to walk onto the stage. The energy in the room felt electric, and the audience clapped enthusiastically as James Corden, the host of the show, introduced his special guest for the evening, Keanu Reeves. Known around the world for his quiet charm and calm personality, Keanu had become more than just an actor. He was admired not only for his work in movies but also for being humble and kind. Tonight, however, there was a strange feeling in the air. Something seemed different. Keanu walked out onto the stage, dressed casually in a simple black jacket and jeans. His appearance was understated, yet he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made people pay attention. As he took his seat across from James, the audience erupted into cheers. Keanu smiled warmly, waving at the crowd before settling into the couch. His expression was relaxed, almost as if he were sitting down for a casual chat with friends rather than appearing on live television. But underneath that calm exterior, there was a sense that tonight might be unlike any other appearance he'd made before. James started the interview with his usual playful tone, making jokes about Keanu's reserved nature and poking fun at some of his iconic movie roles. At first, Keanu laughed along, nodding politely as James delivered punchline after punchline. The audience loved it, laughing loudly at every quip. For a while, the conversation flowed smoothly, with James asking questions about Keanu's latest projects and sharing amusing anecdotes about their shared experiences in Hollywood. It seemed like another typical episode of the late-night talk show, light-hearted, entertaining, and full of laughter. But then, things began to shift. James, perhaps trying to keep the momentum going or simply looking for a new angle to explore, started steering the conversation toward topics that felt less comfortable. He mentioned Keanu's reputation as the internet's boyfriend, teasing him about how much people adored him online. While this drew chuckles from the audience, Keanu's smile didn't reach his eyes. Instead, he gave a small, polite nod, clearly choosing his words carefully when responding. It was subtle, but anyone paying close attention could see that Keanu wasn't entirely at ease anymore. James pressed on, seemingly oblivious or maybe indifferent to the change in Keanu's demeanor. He brought up Keanu's past relationships, joking about his dating history in a way that made some members of the audience exchange awkward glances. Keanu remained composed, answering briefly without giving too much away. Still, the tension in the room grew thicker. Then came the moment that would alter the course of the entire interview. James made a comment that crossed a line, a remark about a deeply personal tragedy from Keanu's life. It was something everyone knew was painful for him, and yet James tossed it out casually as though it were just another joke. For a split second, the studio fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. James tried to laugh it off, gesturing exaggeratedly as if to signal that it was all part of the fun. But Keanu's reaction said everything. His body stiffened slightly, and his piercing gaze locked onto James. There was no anger in his face, just a cold seriousness that sent chills through the audience. Without raising his voice, Keanu leaned forward ever so slightly and said, "That wasn't funny." His tone was measured, almost eerily calm, but the weight behind his words was undeniable. The contrast between Keanu's quiet delivery and the gravity of what he said was striking. James looked momentarily stunned, caught off guard by the sudden shift in the dynamic. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. The silence stretched out uncomfortably, broken only by the faint rustling of papers on the desk between them. When James attempted to recover by making another joke, Keanu interrupted him, not rudely, but firmly. "You don't get to do that," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. By now, the audience was completely captivated. Some people sat frozen in their seats, unsure whether to clap or stay quiet. Others shifted uneasily, sensing that they were witnessing something rare and unscripted. What had started as a lighthearted interview had transformed into something raw and real. Keanu's composure never wavered, even as James struggled to regain control of the situation. It was clear that Keanu wasn't angry. Instead, he seemed determined to make a point. And that determination resonated deeply with everyone watching. The seconds ticked by. Keanu continued speaking, addressing not just James but the entire audience. He explained why certain jokes weren't acceptable, using simple language that conveyed powerful truths. His words carried authority, and the sincerity in his voice left no room for misunderstanding. He talked about respect, empathy, and understanding, urging everyone to think twice before trivializing someone else's pain. By the time he finished, the mood in the room had shifted entirely. Slow applause began to ripple through the audience, growing louder and more enthusiastic as people realized the significance of what they had just seen, a genuine moment of honesty on live television. Backstage, whispers spread quickly among the crew and other guests. Footage of the exchange was already circulating online, capturing the attention of viewers who hadn't been watching live. Social media platforms lit up almost instantly, with clips of the heated moment going viral within minutes. People couldn't stop talking about it. Some praised Keanu for standing up for himself and setting boundaries, hailing him as a role model for handling difficult situations with grace and strength. Others criticized James, accusing him of being insensitive and unprofessional. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting every detail of the interaction and sparking debates about humor, respect, and accountability in entertainment. Meanwhile, Keanu chose to step back from the spotlight once the show ended. He didn't give interviews or post anything on social media about the incident. Instead, he let his actions speak for themselves, which only added to the admiration people felt for him. Fans flooded his accounts with messages of support, sharing stories of how his response inspired them to stand up for themselves in their own lives. For many, Keanu's quiet courage became a reminder of the importance of speaking your truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. In the days that followed, the fallout from the incident continued to unfold. James issued a public apology during his next episode, acknowledging that he had gone too far and expressing regret for offending Keanu and anyone else affected by his remarks. While some appreciated his willingness to admit fault, others felt the apology lacked sincerity given the circumstances. Regardless, the conversation sparked by the moment refused to die down. It forced many in the entertainment industry to reflect on how they approached interviews and humor, particularly when dealing with sensitive subjects. For Keanu, the experience reinforced his reputation as a man of integrity, someone who stood firm in his values even under pressure. The incident eventually became more than just a controversy. It turned into a cultural touchstone. Memes, articles, and discussions celebrated Keanu's composure and bravery, solidifying his status as a modern-day hero both on and off screen. It reminded people of the power of words and the importance of treating others with dignity. Though it likely wasn't easy for either man involved, the exchange left a lasting impact, sparking meaningful dialogue and inspiring change. And, as for Keanu, he returned to doing what he did best, working hard, staying humble, and quietly reminding the world that sometimes the simplest acts of bravery can make the biggest difference. The moment Keanu spoke those words, "You don't get to do that," the studio seemed to freeze. The audience, which had been laughing and clapping just moments earlier, now sat in stunned silence. Even James Corden, who was usually so quick with a comeback or a joke, appeared unsure of how to respond. His face flushed slightly as he tried to recover, throwing out another lighthearted comment in an attempt to ease the tension. But Keanu didn't budge. He continued to look directly at James, his expression unwavering. It was clear that this wasn't just about one inappropriate remark. It was about something much bigger. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "When you talk about things like that," he said, referring to the tragedy James had joked about, "it's not just entertainment. It's someone's life. It's real." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some people exchanged nervous glances while others stared intently at Keanu, hanging on every word. For many in the room, it was the first time they had ever seen him speak so openly about something so personal. And though his tone remained composed, there was no mistaking the depth of emotion behind what he was saying. James, still trying to regain control of the situation, attempted to pivot back to safer topics. He asked Keanu about his upcoming projects and shared a story about how much he admired Keanu's work ethic. But Keanu wasn't ready to move on. Instead, he used the opportunity to explain why certain lines shouldn't be crossed. He spoke, slowly and deliberately, choosing each word carefully. "I think we all need to be mindful of what we say and how it affects others," he said. "It's easy to make jokes when you're not the one being hurt by them." As Keanu continued speaking, the atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. What had started as a fun, carefree interview had turned into something profound. People in the audience began to realize they were witnessing a rare moment, a celebrity standing up for himself and setting boundaries in front of millions of viewers. Keanu wasn't yelling or losing his temper. Instead, he was using his platform to deliver a powerful message about empathy and respect. And the more he spoke, the more the audience responded. At first, there was only scattered applause, hesitant and uncertain. But as Keanu's words sank in, the clapping grew louder, filling the studio with a sense of solidarity and admiration. Backstage, the crew members watched in awe. Many of them had worked on countless episodes of the show, but none could remember a moment quite like this. One of the producers whispered to another, "This is going to blow up." They weren't wrong. Within minutes of the segment airing, clips of Keanu's response began circulating online. Social media platforms lit up as users shared snippets of the exchange, adding their own commentary and reactions. Some praised Keanu for his courage and poise, calling him a role model for handling difficult situations with grace. Others criticized James, accusing him of crossing a line and failing to understand the weight of his words. By the time the episode ended, the internet was ablaze with discussions about what had happened. Late-night talk shows dedicated entire segments to analyzing the incident, dissecting every word and gesture from both men. News outlets published articles exploring the broader implications of the moment, questioning whether humor should have limits, and debating the responsibilities of public figures when it comes to sensitive topics. Meanwhile, fans of Keanu flooded his social media accounts with messages of support. Strangers shared stories of how his response had inspired them to stand up for themselves in their own lives, while memes celebrating his composure spread rapidly across platforms like Twitter and Instagram. Despite the growing buzz, Keanu chose to stay out of the spotlight. He didn't give interviews or post anything online addressing the incident. In fact, he seemed to retreat entirely, focusing instead on his work and personal life. This decision only added to the admiration people felt for him. Unlike many celebrities, who might have seized the opportunity to capitalize on such a viral moment, Keanu let his actions speak for themselves. To his fans, this quiet dignity reinforced everything they loved about him: the humility, the kindness, the unwavering sense of integrity. For James, the aftermath was more complicated. While he apologized during his next episode, acknowledging that he had gone too far and expressing regret for offending Keanu and anyone else affected by his remarks, the apology received mixed reactions. Some viewers appreciated his willingness to admit fault, seeing it as a sign of accountability. Others, however, felt that the apology lacked sincerity, pointing out that it came after days of intense backlash. Regardless of where people stood, the incident forced James to confront questions about his hosting style and the balance between humor and sensitivity. In the weeks that followed, the conversation sparked by the exchange continued to evolve. It wasn't just about Keanu and James anymore. It was about larger issues within the entertainment industry and society as a whole. Many began reflecting on the importance of empathy and communication, particularly in spaces like late-night television, where humor often takes center stage. Writers and comedians weighed in, discussing the fine line between making people laugh and causing harm. Some argued that comedy should always push boundaries, while others insisted that certain topics deserved more care and consideration. Through it all, Keanu remained a symbol of quiet strength. People admired not only his ability to handle the situation with grace, but also his willingness to use his platform to advocate for respect and understanding. For many, the incident served as a reminder of the power of words and the impact they can have on others. It challenged everyone watching to think twice before making a joke or brushing off someone else's pain. And while the moment itself may have lasted only a few minutes, its effects rippled far beyond the confines of the studio. As time went on, the viral clip of Keanu's response became more than just a piece of content. It became a cultural touchstone. Memes featuring his calm yet stern expression popped up everywhere, accompanied by captions like, "When someone disrespects your values," or "Standing up for what's right." Articles celebrated him as a modern-day hero, praising his ability to turn a potentially negative experience into an opportunity for meaningful dialogue. Even months later, people still reference the incident whenever conversations about accountability and empathy arose. For Keanu, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be for someone constantly in the public eye. He continued working on his films, staying true to his reputation as a hardworking and humble actor. Off-screen, he maintained his low-key lifestyle, avoiding the trappings of fame that often consumed other celebrities. To those who knew him best, this was no surprise. Keanu had always been someone who prioritized authenticity over attention, substance over spectacle, and in standing up to James that night, he proved once again that he was a man of principle, a quiet force capable of inspiring millions without ever seeking the spotlight. Though the incident likely wasn't easy for either man involved, it ultimately left a lasting impact. It sparked important conversations, challenged societal norms, and reminded everyone of the value of treating others with kindness and respect. For Keanu, it reinforced his status as a beloved figure, not just because of his talent or charm, but because of the way he carried himself with dignity and purpose. And for the rest of the world, it served as a lesson in the power of standing firm in your beliefs, even when it feels uncomfortable. Because sometimes, the simplest acts of bravery can create waves of change that resonate far beyond what anyone might expect. The days following the live incident were a whirlwind of reactions and discussions. Social media platforms buzzed with activity as people around the world shared their thoughts on what had happened. Clips of Keanu's response were played over and over again, each time sparking new debates and conversations. Some viewers marveled at how calm and composed he had remained, while others pointed out that his reaction was exactly what one would expect from someone known for his quiet strength. Fans flooded Keanu's social media accounts with messages of support, calling him an inspiration, and thanking him for standing up not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt dismissed or disrespected. Meanwhile, James Corden faced a wave of criticism. While some defended him, saying his jokes were never meant to cause harm, others accused him of being careless and tone-deaf. Late-night talk shows and morning news programs dissected the moment, analyzing every detail, from the look on Keanu's face to the awkward pause that followed James's controversial remark. Comedians weighed in, offering their perspectives on where the line between humor and insensitivity should be drawn. Some argued that comedy thrives on pushing boundaries, while others insisted that certain topics are simply off-limits, especially when they touch on deeply personal tragedies. As the conversation grew louder, James issued a public apology during his next episode. Sitting alone on stage without his usual band or audience banter, he addressed the camera directly. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," he began, looking genuinely remorseful. He acknowledged that his comments had crossed a line and expressed regret for offending Keanu and anyone else affected by his words. "It wasn't my intention to hurt anyone, but I realize now that intentions don't always matter. It's about impact," he said. The apology was heartfelt, and many viewers appreciated his willingness to take responsibility. However, others remained skeptical, feeling that it came too late and lacked real accountability. Keanu, true to form, stayed silent throughout the aftermath. He didn't respond to James's apology publicly, nor did he engage with any of the online chatter surrounding the incident. Instead, he focused on his work, attending press events for his upcoming projects and spending time with friends and family. For those who admired him, this silence spoke volumes. It reinforced the idea that Keanu wasn't interested in drama or attention. He simply wanted to do what was right and move on. His decision to let the moment stand on its own, without further commentary, only deepened the respect people had for him. Behind the scenes, however, The incident sparked important conversations within the entertainment industry. Writers' rooms across late-night television began revisiting their scripts, questioning whether certain jokes were appropriate. Producers discussed ways to ensure that interviews remained lighthearted without veering into insensitive territory. Even comedians started reflecting on their material, realizing that humor could still entertain without alienating or offending. The ripple effects of Keanu's response extended far beyond the stage of The Late Late Show. They prompted a broader reckoning about the role of empathy and respect in entertainment. For Keanu personally, life returned to its usual rhythm. He continued working on his films, balancing long hours on set with moments of quiet reflection. Off-screen, he maintained the same low-profile lifestyle that had endeared him to fans for decades. Whether walking his dog in Los Angeles or riding his motorcycle through winding roads, Keanu seemed unfazed by the viral attention. To those close to him, this came as no surprise. They knew that fame had never defined him. Instead, he valued authenticity and connection above all else. Yet, the impact of that night lingered in subtle ways. Strangers approached him more frequently, sharing stories of how his actions had inspired them to speak up in their own lives. A young woman told him she had finally confronted her boss about workplace harassment after seeing his calm yet firm response. A man recounted how he stood up to a friend who had made a hurtful joke, using Keanu's words as guidance. These encounters touched Keanu deeply, reminding him of the power of leading by example. Though he hadn't sought to become a symbol of courage, he recognized that his actions had resonated with people in ways he couldn't have anticipated. As weeks turned into months, the initial frenzy surrounding the incident began to fade. Late night, hosts moved on to other topics, and social media shifted its focus to newer controversies. But the memory of that moment refused to disappear entirely. Memes featuring Keanu's stoic expression continued to circulate, often accompanied by captions like, "When you're done playing games," or "Respect is non-negotiable." Articles celebrating him as a cultural icon appeared regularly, praising not just his acting talent, but also his unwavering moral compass. In classrooms, workplaces, and living rooms, people continued referencing the incident whenever discussions about boundaries and empathy arose. The exchange also left a lasting mark on James Corden. While he resumed hosting his show, there was a noticeable shift in his interviewing style. He became more cautious, avoiding topics that might risk offending guests or audiences. Some critics argued that this newfound restraint made his segments feel less spontaneous, while others praised him for taking steps to grow from the experience. Regardless of opinions, it was clear that the incident had forced James to reflect on his role as a host and the responsibilities that came with it. For many, the story of Keanu shutting down James served as a reminder of the importance of speaking your truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. It showed that standing up for yourself doesn't require aggression or anger. It can be done with grace and dignity. And perhaps most importantly, it highlighted the profound impact that small, deliberate actions can have on the world. By choosing to address the situation calmly and thoughtfully, Keanu had sparked a global conversation about respect, empathy, and accountability. Even outside the realm of entertainment, the incident resonated with people from all walks of life. Teachers used it as an example in classrooms to discuss the ethics of communication. Therapists referenced it in sessions to encourage clients to assert themselves in difficult situations. Parents shared it with their children as a lesson in kindness and understanding. What had started as a single moment on live television had evolved into something much bigger, a catalyst for change and reflection. In the end, the story wasn't just about Keanu Reeves or James Corden. It was about the collective human experience. It reminded everyone that words carry weight, that actions speak louder than intentions, and that standing up for what's right is always worth it. For Keanu, it reaffirmed the values he had lived by his entire life: humility, integrity, and compassion. And for the rest of the world, it served as a powerful example of how one person's quiet courage can inspire millions to think differently, act differently, and ultimately be better. Though the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines eventually faded, the lessons from that night endured. They found their way into everyday conversations, shaping how people interacted with one another. And for those who had witnessed it, whether live in the studio or through a viral clip, they carried the memory with them, a testament to the enduring power of authenticity and the quiet strength that lies within us all. As the weeks passed, the conversation around Keanu's response to James Corden began to take on a life of its own. People weren't just talking about the incident anymore. They were drawing lessons from it and applying them to their own lives. The moment had become a cultural touchstone, a reference point for discussions about respect, empathy, and personal boundaries. For many, Keanu's calm yet firm reaction served as a blueprint for how to handle difficult situations with grace and dignity. In workplaces across the globe, employees found themselves recalling Keanu's words during uncomfortable moments. A young woman working in an office where inappropriate jokes were common finally mustered the courage to speak up. She approached her manager and explained why certain comments made her feel disrespected. "I thought about what Keanu said," she later told a colleague. "It's not about making a big scene, it's about standing your ground quietly but firmly." Her bravery inspired others in the office to do the same, leading to meaningful changes in how coworkers interacted with one another. Schools also became spaces where the incident was discussed. Teachers used clips of the exchange to spark conversations about communication and the importance of thinking before speaking. In one high school classroom, a teacher played the video and asked students to reflect on why Keanu's response resonated so deeply. One student raised his hand and said, "He didn't yell or get mad, but you could tell he meant every word. It showed that you don't have to be loud to be heard." The class went on to brainstorm ways they could practice kindness and respect in their daily interactions, creating a ripple effect of positive behavior throughout the school. Even in casual settings like coffee shops, gyms, and community centers, people brought up the incident. Friends gathered over cups of coffee would recount the story, marveling at how Keanu had handled himself under pressure. "I wish I could stay that calm when someone says something rude," one person admitted. Another replied, "Maybe we can try. If Keanu can do it, maybe we can too." These small moments of reflection added up, encouraging individuals to think twice before making hurtful remarks or brushing off someone else's feelings. The entertainment industry continued to grapple with the aftermath as well. Late-night hosts adjusted their approaches, realizing that humor could still thrive without crossing lines. Writers' rooms implemented new guidelines to ensure sensitivity when crafting jokes. Producers held meetings to discuss how interviews could remain engaging while respecting guests' boundaries. Comedians, who often walked a fine line between edgy and offensive, began experimenting with material that challenged audiences intellectually rather than emotionally. Slowly but surely, the landscape of late-night television began to shift, thanks in part to the wake-up call provided by Keanu's response. Despite all the attention, Keanu remained remarkably grounded. He attended film festivals to promote his latest projects, gave interviews about his work, and spent time with close friends and family. Yet everywhere he went, people approached him to share how much his actions had inspired them. At a book signing event, a middle-aged man handed him a copy of his novel and said, "Your words changed my life. I started speaking up for myself after seeing you stand up to James." Keanu smiled warmly, thanked the man, and signed the book with a simple message: "Be kind, be brave." For James Corden, the incident marked a turning point in both his career and personal growth. While some critics continued to scrutinize his hosting style, others noticed a sincere effort to improve. He invited experts on empathy and communication to appear on his show, discussing topics like active listening and emotional intelligence. During one episode, he even shared stories from viewers who had learned valuable lessons from the controversy. "This experience taught me that we all make mistakes," he said candidly. "But it's what we do afterward that defines us." James also reached out to Keanu privately to express his gratitude for handling the situation with such poise. Though neither man spoke publicly about their conversation, insiders reported that it was a heartfelt exchange. James later mentioned in an interview that Keanu's quiet strength had left a lasting impression on him, inspiring him to approach his work with greater mindfulness and care. Meanwhile, fans of Keanu kept finding creative ways to celebrate his actions. Artists created paintings and illustrations capturing his stoic expression during the interview, framing them alongside quotes about courage and integrity. Fans organized charity fundraisers in his name, donating proceeds to causes he supported, such as children's hospitals and animal shelters. Social media challenges encouraged people to perform random acts of kindness, tagging their posts with hashtags inspired by Keanu's values. The movement grew organically, spreading far beyond anything anyone could have predicted. Even celebrities joined in, using their platforms to amplify the message. Actors, musicians, and athletes shared stories of times they had stood up for themselves, or others crediting Keanu's example for giving them the confidence to do so. One musician dedicated a song to him, writing lyrics that captured the essence of resilience and compassion. Another actor included a tribute to Keanu in an acceptance speech, saying, "In a world that often feels chaotic, he reminds us of the power of staying true to ourselves." Through it all, Keanu stayed humble. He never sought recognition for what he had done, preferring instead to focus on living authentically. When asked in interviews about the incident, he deflected praise, emphasizing that anyone in his position would have done the same. "It's not about me," he said simply. "It's about treating each other with kindness and understanding." His modesty only endeared him further to those who admired him, reinforcing the idea that true heroes are often the ones who don't seek the spotlight. As time went on, the story of Keanu shutting down James Corden became more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of hope. It reminded people that even in challenging situations, it's possible to respond with grace and purpose. It showed that standing up for yourself doesn't require aggression or drama. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most weight. And perhaps most importantly, it demonstrated that our actions, no matter how small, can inspire others to create positive change. In the end, the impact of that night extended far beyond the confines of a television studio. It touched lives in ways no one could have anticipated, sparking a global conversation about empathy, accountability, and the power of authenticity. For Keanu, it reinforced the values he had always lived by: humility, integrity, and compassion. And for the rest of the world, it served as a powerful reminder that even the simplest acts of courage can leave a lasting legacy. Though the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines eventually faded, the lessons from that night endured. They found their way into everyday conversations, shaping how people interacted with one another. And for those who had witnessed it, whether live in the studio or through a viral clip, they carried the memory with them, a testament to the enduring power of authenticity and the quiet strength that lies within us all. Months after the incident, the ripple effects of Keanu's response continued to spread, touching lives in ways both big and small. What had started as a single moment on live television had evolved into something much larger, a movement of sorts inspiring people to reflect on their own behavior and strive for better communication. The simplicity of Keanu's actions, his calm tone, his unwavering conviction, had resonated deeply with audiences worldwide, proving that even the quietest moments can create waves of change. In neighborhoods across the globe, people began to notice subtle shifts in how they interacted with one another. Conversations became more thoughtful, jokes more considerate. At dinner tables, parents used Keanu's example to teach their children about empathy and respect. "When you say something hurtful," one mother explained to her son, "it doesn't matter if you didn't mean it. It still hurts. Think about how your words might make someone feel." Her son nodded, recalling the viral clip he'd seen online. "Like when Keanu told James he couldn't joke about sad things," he said. His mother smiled. "Exactly. Community groups also embraced the spirit of the moment." In a small-town library, a book club decided to dedicate an entire session to discussing lessons from Keanu's response. Members brought books about kindness, courage, and standing up for what's right, sharing passages that reminded them of his quiet strength. One member, a retired teacher, stood up and said, "What I admire most is how he didn't let anger take over. He stayed calm, but he made his point clear. That's harder than it looks." Everyone in the room agreed. nodding silently as they reflected on the importance of staying composed under pressure. Even businesses took note of the cultural shift. Corporate training programs began incorporating discussions about empathy and accountability into their workshops. Managers encouraged employees to think critically about workplace dynamics, emphasizing the value of creating environments where everyone felt respected and heard. During one such session, a team leader played a video of Keanu's response and asked participants to share their thoughts. "He didn't raise his voice," one employee observed, "but you could tell he meant every word. It showed me that you don't have to be aggressive to stand your ground." The entertainment industry, too, saw lasting changes. Late-night talk shows adopted stricter guidelines for interviews, ensuring that hosts avoided sensitive topics unless explicitly invited by guests. Writers' rooms implemented new protocols to vet jokes before airing them, recognizing that humor could still entertain without alienating or offending. Comedians experimented with material that challenged audiences, intellectually rather than emotionally, finding success in storytelling that celebrated human connection over cheap laughs. Slowly but surely, the landscape of comedy began to evolve, thanks in part to the wake-up call provided by Keanu's response. For James Corden, the experience remained a turning point in his career. While some critics continued to scrutinize his hosting style, others praised his efforts to grow from the incident. He invited experts on empathy and communication to appear on his show, sparking conversations about active listening, emotional intelligence, and the importance of treating others with dignity. During one particularly memorable episode, he shared stories from viewers who had been inspired to improve their relationships after witnessing the controversy. "I've learned so much from this experience," he admitted candidly, "and I hope we all continue learning together." Behind the scenes, James also worked hard to rebuild trust with his audience. He collaborated with organizations focused on mental health awareness, using his platform to highlight issues like grief, loss, and resilience. Fans noticed the shift, applauding him for turning a difficult moment into an opportunity for growth. Though not everyone forgave him immediately, many appreciated his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and work toward meaningful change. Meanwhile, Keanu remained steadfast in his approach to life. He continued working on his films, balancing long hours on set with moments of quiet reflection. Off-screen, he maintained the same low-profile lifestyle that had endeared him to fans for decades. Whether walking his dog in Los Angeles or riding his motorcycle through winding roads, Keanu seemed unfazed by the viral attention. To those close to him, this came as no surprise. They knew that fame had never defined him. Instead, he valued authenticity and connection above all else. Yet, the impact of that night lingered in subtle ways. Strangers approached him more frequently, sharing stories of how his actions had inspired them to speak up in their own lives. A young woman told him she had finally confronted her boss about workplace harassment after seeing his calm, yet firm, response. A man recounted how he stood up to a friend who had made a hurtful joke, using Keanu's words as guidance. These encounters touched Keanu deeply, reminding him of the power of leading by example. Though he hadn't sought to become a symbol of courage, he recognized that his actions had resonated with people in ways he couldn't have anticipated. As time went on, the memory of the incident continued to inspire creative expressions of gratitude. Artists painted murals depicting Keanu's stoic expression during the interview, framing them alongside quotes about bravery and integrity. Fans organized charity fundraisers in his name, donating proceeds to causes he supported, such as children's hospitals and animal shelters. Social media challenges encouraged people to perform random acts of kindness, tagging their posts with hashtags inspired by Keanu's values. The movement grew organically, spreading far beyond anything anyone could have predicted. Celebrities joined in as well, using their platforms to amplify the message. Actors, musicians, and athletes shared stories of times they had stood up for themselves or others, crediting Keanu's example for giving them the confidence to do so. One musician dedicated a song to him, writing lyrics that captured the essence of resilience and compassion. Another actor included a tribute to Keanu in an acceptance speech saying, "In a world that often feels chaotic, he reminds us of the power of staying true to ourselves." Through it all, Keanu stayed humble. He never sought recognition for what he had done, preferring instead to focus on living authentically. When asked in interviews about the incident, he deflected praise, emphasizing that anyone in his position would have done the same. "It's not about me," he said simply. "It's about treating each other with kindness and understanding." His modesty only endeared him further to those who admired him, reinforcing the idea that true heroes are often the ones who don't seek the spotlight. In the end, the story of Keanu shutting down James Corden became more than just a viral moment. It became a testament to the enduring power of integrity, empathy, and authenticity. It reminded everyone that words carry weight, that actions speak louder than intentions, and that standing up for what's right is always worth it. For Keanu, it reaffirmed the values he had lived by his entire life: humility, integrity, and compassion. And for the rest of the world, it served as a powerful example of how one person's quiet courage can inspire millions to think differently, act differently, and ultimately be better. Though the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines eventually faded, the lessons from that night endured. They found their way into everyday conversations, shaping how people interacted with one another. And for those who had witnessed it, whether live in the studio or through a viral clip, they carried the memory with them, a testament to the enduring power of authenticity and the quiet strength that lies within us all. As the months turned into years, the story of Keanu Reeves shutting down James Corden on live television remained a source of inspiration for people around the world. What had begun as a fleeting moment in the spotlight transformed into a lasting legacy, a reminder of the power of standing up for what is right with grace and dignity. The simplicity of Keanu's actions continued to resonate deeply, proving that even the smallest gestures could spark meaningful change. In schools, workplaces, and communities, the lessons from that night were still being shared. Teachers included the incident in lesson plans about communication and respect, encouraging students to think critically about how their words affect others. One teacher in a small town created a classroom activity where students wrote letters to someone they admired, explaining why that person inspired them. Many chose Keanu, praising his courage and humility. "He didn't shout or get angry," one student wrote, "but he made everyone listen. That's what real strength looks like." Workplaces also embraced the values Keanu represented. Companies implemented training programs focused on empathy and accountability, using his response as an example of how to address difficult situations calmly and respectfully. During team meetings, managers often referenced the incident, reminding employees that kindness and understanding should always guide their interactions. In one office, a bulletin board was dedicated to quotes about integrity and compassion, with Keanu's name appearing frequently alongside messages like, "Respect isn't negotiable," and "Stand firm in your values." Even in casual settings, the memory of Keanu's reaction lingered. Friends gathered over coffee or dinner would bring up the story, marveling at how it had impacted their lives. "I used to let people walk all over me," one woman admitted during a lunch outing. "But after seeing Keanu stand up for himself so calmly, I realized I didn't have to be rude to set boundaries. Now I speak up when something doesn't feel right." Her friends nodded in agreement, sharing similar stories of moments when they had found the courage to assert themselves. The entertainment industry, too, continued to evolve because of the incident. Late-night talk shows became more mindful of their content, striking a balance between humor and sensitivity. Writers crafted jokes with greater care, ensuring they didn't alienate or offend audiences. Hosts developed deeper connections with their guests, focusing on creating safe spaces for open and honest conversations. Comedians experimented with material that celebrated human resilience and connection, finding success in storytelling that uplifted rather than mocked. The shift wasn't immediate, but over time it became clear that the industry was moving toward a more thoughtful approach to entertainment. For James Corden, the experience marked a profound chapter in his personal and professional growth. While some critics still questioned his past decisions, many acknowledged the sincerity of his efforts to learn and improve. He became an advocate for mental health awareness, partnering with organizations to provide resources and support for those struggling with grief and loss. His show featured segments highlighting stories of resilience, offering viewers hope and encouragement. Though not everyone forgave him immediately, many appreciated his willingness to use his platform for good. Behind the scenes, James reached out to Keanu privately on several occasions, expressing gratitude for the way he had handled the situation. Their conversations remained confidential, but insiders reported that they were heartfelt and meaningful. James later mentioned in an interview that Keanu's quiet strength had left a lasting impression on him, inspiring him to approach his work with greater mindfulness and care. "He reminded me that we're all human," James said, "and sometimes the best thing we can do is listen and learn." Meanwhile, Keanu continued living his life with the same humility and authenticity that had endeared him to fans worldwide. He worked tirelessly on his films, pouring his energy into projects that challenged and inspired him. Off-screen, he maintained his low-profile lifestyle, avoiding the trappings of fame that often consumed other celebrities. Whether spending time with close friends, riding his motorcycle through scenic roads, or volunteering at local shelters, Keanu remained grounded in the values that defined him: kindness, integrity, and compassion. Despite his reluctance to seek attention, Keanu couldn't escape the admiration of those around him. Strangers approached him regularly, sharing stories of how his actions had inspired them to make positive changes in their own lives. A young man once told him he had finally confronted his parents about their dismissive behavior, using Keanu's calm yet firm response as a model. A woman recounted how she had stood up to a co-worker who had been making inappropriate comments, crediting Keanu's example for giving her the confidence to speak up. These encounters touched Keanu deeply, reinforcing his belief in the power of leading by example. As time went on, the cultural impact of the incident only grew stronger. Artists created murals, paintings, and sculptures celebrating Keanu's stoic expression during the interview, framing them alongside quotes about bravery and empathy. Fans organized charity events in his honor, raising funds for causes he supported, such as children's hospitals, animal shelters, and mental health initiatives. Social media challenges encouraged people to perform random acts of kindness, tagging their posts with hashtags inspired by Keanu's values. The movement spread organically, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Celebrities also joined in, using their platforms to amplify the message. Actors, musicians, and athletes shared stories of times they had stood up for themselves or others, crediting Keanu's example for giving them the courage to do so. One musician released a song dedicated to him, writing lyrics that captured the essence of resilience and compassion. Another actor included a tribute to Keanu in an acceptance speech saying, "In a world that often feels chaotic, he reminds us of the power of staying true to ourselves." Through it all, Keanu stayed humble. When asked about the incident in debut interviews, he deflected praise, emphasizing that anyone in his position would have done the same. "It's not about me," he said simply. "It's about treating each other with kindness and understanding." His modesty only endeared him further to those who admired him, reinforcing the idea that true heroes are often the ones who don't seek the spotlight. In the end, the story of Keanu shutting down James Corden became more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of hope and resilience. It reminded people that even in challenging situations, it's possible to respond with grace and purpose. It showed that standing up for yourself doesn't require aggression or drama. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most weight. And perhaps most importantly, it demonstrated that our actions, no matter how small, can inspire others to create positive change. Though the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines eventually faded, the lessons from that night endured. They found their way into everyday conversations, shaping how people interacted with one another. And for those who had witnessed it, whether live in the studio or through a viral clip, they carried the memory with them, a testament to the enduring power of authenticity and the quiet strength that lies within us all. As the years passed, the legacy of that moment continued to grow, reminding generations that kindness, empathy, and integrity are timeless values worth striving for. For Keanu, it reaffirmed the principles he had lived by his entire life, and for the rest of the world, It served as a powerful reminder that even the simplest acts of courage can leave a lasting impact, inspiring millions to think differently, act differently, and ultimately, be better.